The 2022 the 2022 NFL draft is over, and I'm tongue twisted by it because it's a little bit overwhelming. But we need to take a quick and efficient look back at what happened and make sense out of it. Ted, what did you glean from the NFL draft? What stood out to you the most?
Pretty much what we had talked about previously on our shows and what Ron and I have been talking about for well over a year. This is going to be, and now was, the deepest draft you could ever imagine. And Ron, it is absolutely amazing how many teams got better, not by one or two guys, by several guys. This never happens, and that is all about the depth.
Well, I'm pretty, what's the right word for it? I'm not a soft grader. I tend to grade the drafts hard, and this year we're going to have more like A's and B's than we've had before. We had a lot of players change hands. That might upgrade or downgrade the draft as we go through. But other than the position of quarterback, which turned out to be even worse than what we talked about, this draft went as expected with a lot of talent and a lot of good talent in the third, fourth, fifth rounds.
I agree with what Ted said 100%. It just seems like almost every team seemed to have improved themselves. And boy, that just makes for better quality product. And I'm looking really forward to when the season finally does get going. Yeah. Ron, you are the draft expert. You are my go-to guy. We're going to look at the draft quickly and efficiently, but division by division. So why don't you start this off with the AFC here?
So with the AFC East, really one-word statement for Buffalo. They filled their early needs. They secured their spot at or near the top of the food chain as far as going into the 2022 season. They did what they had to do. Miami's draft is more about how much draft capital they took away from themselves with trades, including the Tyreek Hill trade. They lost 5 or 6 draft choices overall. You see a very small board of 4, and they misfired in the draft. So this is all about Tyreek Hill. We're going to talk about New England later. As everybody has said throughout the media, the Jets really did themselves proud in the draft, and it was a long time coming, but they went pretty much 6 for 6 in terms of what they added in the draft. And it was great to see them finally get up there. They got a lot of ground to make up. They still have a young quarterback. They still have offensive line issues, but this draft was one of the top 3 that we'll have seen this past weekend.
And so looking at this, you got Miami, who you say did not do well, even though they got Tyreek Hill. What does that tell you about their organization? And moving forward, this was their opportunity to do something that they needed to do now. They're still a building team.
They flipped the script in terms of how they were going to design the offense around Tua, but they did it all through free agency. They added wide receiver. They added 2 running backs. They added a tight end. They added 2 offensive linemen. So the draft was nothing to them. They have experience, but they're not going to add any starters from this particular draft. And it's going to be up to the coaching staff to keep the defense at an even keel, even though that area was pretty much dismissed in free agency.
Wow.
My take on this division was Buffalo did what they had to do. Miami, the Patriots, you said we're going to get to later, but it seemed like Belichick kind of outsmarted himself and kind of lost some draft capital. He kind of passed over a linebacker he could have had or filled that position with. They seem to kind of have a nothing burger draft. The Jets, wow, when you consider how many injuries they had last year and head coach has a year under his belt and the players they've added in free agency in this draft, they won't be a nauseating team to think about every week coming forward. Would you disagree with any of that?
Not at all. Mekhi Becton, the draft choice that was highly regarded in 2020, and then they abused him in 2020 by having him go out there injured. So there was a give and take within the organization as to whether or not he wanted to remain with the Jets. He's working out off campus now. And if he comes back, that's going to be big for the offensive line, which still needs some help.
So how good is that Wilson to Wilson combination going to be in New York?
Keep them upright, and we'll see. This is, a lot of the young quarterbacks got some help in this draft.
Yeah.
Where we go? We're going to the Ravens.
Well, we're going to talk about the Ravens later, but they were outstanding in this draft. So let's move on to Cincinnati. Offensive line, they handled in free agency. Defensive back, half their draft was for defensive backfield. So as usual, Cincinnati hit their focus. Cleveland drafted a lot of rated players. Nothing wrong with what Cleveland did. They spread everything out. Their focus was great. Pittsburgh's very unconventional draft, as you know. I was on record saying high ceiling for Willis, but very low floor. They could bomb out. And basically, Mike Tomlin told us all what he was thinking. He went the other way. He said, we looked at Pickett and we saw a very high floor. And that's pretty much why they went in this direction. The rest of the draft, completely risky.
How about the fact that they thought that Pickett was the most ready guy now? If they needed him soon, he'd be able to do something.
Yeah, it'll be quarterback competition in the room, and you guys can comment further. Who do you think is going to win the job? Trubisky?
I'm pro Trubisky. I think this guy is fine. I'm one of the, I'll be on this island. I'm going to say it all summer.
I think he's okay, but I thought he was abused by the coaches in Chicago, and that hurt his growth period. But I still have doubts about his ceiling, and I think his decision making is not great. But Kenny Pickett's a kid, and who knows what he's going to do as a pro and how long it'll take him to read defenses at that level. But he's got no excuse. The other thing Ron and I had talked about previously, the quarterbacks that did go in this draft, wherever they went to good situations for them. And this is a good one for Pickett.
Well, I think Cincinnati did what they had to do. I'm not so sure about Cleveland. For some reason, it's a blind spot for me. It just seems like they were stacked and ready to go already. They still need to deal with Mayfield, but and the Steelers, their biggest problem is now blanketed. I can't believe they took two quarterbacks, but I think between Pickett and Trubisky, they're set at quarterback. They've added some offense. They've filled in a little bit of defense. They laughed off Pittsburgh that they were going to be done. I think Pittsburgh's going to be here. I think they're going to be a team to look out for.
It's a warning for me. I think their defense is fine. We talked about that in the past. It's still an offensive line that is subpar, and it's a good thing that Trubisky has mobility because he might need it with the offensive line. Pickens is a boom-bust product. We know that what he can do at his best, he's a top 15 wide receiver in this draft, but at his worst, he'll disappear during games and come up with 2 catches a game. So it's very risky on Pittsburgh's part.
Okay, next.
It's always interesting when you're talking about these teams, and they were all over the place, I can tell you that. Houston continues its nasty habit of drafting players that we don't know if they're going to see the field due to injury, over trading for players. I like Mechie, for example. They got him at 44, but he was never going to be going in the first 2 rounds, more of a possession receiver guy. So I actually like him, but they just lose value too much for me. The Colts had a so-so draft, in my opinion. They had a nice tight end landing spot for Jelani Woods. This guy's athletic, we had Kent on the show, and Jelani Woods had a perfect 10 on relative athletic score, and now he goes with Matt Ryan to this team. It's a great fit. Jags we'll talk about a little bit later. I have concerns about them. And the Titans basically, the trade for a very established wide receiver, Brown, the one that they gave up, I like Burks, but it's basically a wash, and almost everything Tennessee did was a wash. So in my opinion, you guys can comment on it. Tennessee didn't get better. They just tried to stay the same.
Yeah, you call it a boring draft, basically, for them.
Yeah.
And their needs, look, we're talking, everybody's talking about the Malik Willis, Ryan Tannehill scenario right now, and which I think is totally ridiculous. I'm bored even thinking about it. Tannehill should be doing whatever the hell he wants to do, and Malik Willis has got a learning curve, and we have no idea what that is. But it's a good fit for him. How would you like to go to Mike Vrabel immediately coming out of college, and you don't have to play, and you can learn, and you could sit for whatever amount of time it needs to be?
I think we're seeing the first signs of teams this season doing smart things for their cap maneuvering, and for what they have to pay A.J. Brown to be able to get, somebody that can step in right away and contribute and save a ton of money. I think we're going to see a hell of a lot more of that going forward, because the contracts they're paying these receivers it's going to blow up in their faces. It's going to be Albert Pujols type deals over and over.
Yeah. Well, you could throw in that quarterback in Cleveland in the same category, because that just basically explodes whatever the salary cap issues for a lot of teams moving forward. If you got to do whatever Deshaun Watson did to get to that level, you're laughing. So this is going to get crazy in the next few years.
We said no wide receiver, or I said no wide receiver is really worth $25 million. 1 out of 11 players. You got to have the rest of the team around you. So from that standpoint, Tennessee did a great job of taking $20 million off the table, and they got a really good rookie receiver. But for 2022, if you look at what the division you have up right now, the AFC West has done in the offseason, Tennessee slides a little bit only because everybody else in the AFC seemed to just get crazy in terms of the draft. And, we start with Denver, for example. Russell Wilson is on the team. So automatically they've solved a quarterback problem. And they had a so-so draft. I have a lot of problems with the talent level that they had. Have a lot of unranked players on the Denver draft board. And this should not be a year you have a lot of unranked players. Kansas City did great.
We're seeing Denver propped up to the number 2 favorite to win the Super Bowl. I think that's a little optimistic there.
The Russell Wilson hype is what it is. It doesn't guarantee anything. Obviously, they're better, but that doesn't mean just because they didn't do well in the draft that all of a sudden Russell Wilson's the savior. I don't think it works that way.
I saw a lot of commentary that Kansas City may actually make it back this year after all. What were your thoughts on how they drafted?
Well, they stole another offensive lineman in the 5th round. You'll see Darian Kennard's name. Last year, they had a 3rd-round talent that they picked in the 6th round. He started all the games, made the all-rookie team. They drafted my best offensive center at the end of the 2nd round, and he was about one of the 10 best offensive linemen in the whole game. So they did it again. About the only thing they didn't do is really shore up their run defense. And maybe they could have added a wide receiver as well, having lost Tyreek Hill. And they got Sky Moore, which is nice, but he's not Tyreek, and he's just going to be a rookie. But Kansas City certainly positioned themselves to be right at the front of the line once again.
Well, let's not forget Kansas City started off horribly last season because they were very young on that offensive line. And boy, did they come together. And when I heard that they got that center, I'm like, holy moly, that's going to really help them out now.
Yeah, but also defensively, that was a growing sort of a group there that we didn't know. As the season got better, they got better, and that was important. But remember, they don't have Matthew anymore, so we'll see how that goes.
5 of their top 6 draft choices were for the defense, so it tells you that they think Mahomes is going to do fine offensively. And of those 5 players, I'd say 4 of them are eventual starters. So they're not bad. You want to take a little bit of look at the Chargers. We'll skip the special teams talk for right now, but I think Zion Johnson was a tremendous fit for this team. A very astute move where they needed help at the guard. There was talk that they would get Penning, but this is a better fit for them. They've added some speed. They've done a lot of different things. I thought the Raiders went sideways. Not a lot of talent added.
I agree.
Yeah, the Chargers just keep getting deeper and deeper. That's one team that whatever injury they get, they probably will have somebody to fill the gaps.
I saw the Raiders in the top 6 or 7 ranking. I thought that was insanity.
Wow.
Okay, well, you'll see my ratings in June, and if the Raiders are 6 or 7, it's going to be a typo.
Was that did the last name Davis come into play on whoever ranked them 6th or 7th?
You would have thought so.
Yeah,
got to be a relative.
Yeah. One word for the AFC East NFC East Dallas Cowboys would be passive. I thought they kind of stood around and watched the draft and then kind of picked decent players along the way. I like Tolbert, the wide receiver. Sam Williams, typical Dallas pick. Good on the field, troubled off the field. Let's hope he toes the line. This is not the organization that they enable people, unfortunately. Yeah. So you have to be careful about that. Kind of a ho-hum draft. The Giants, welcome to the NFL.
Yeah.
Did a great job. Third day, excellent. First day, excellent. I would have changed their picks in rounds 2 and 3, but I'm not complaining overall about the talent. This team got really, really deep here. And
how many starters, Ron, out of that group?
Starters, okay. Thibodeau for sure. Neal for sure. I don't think Robinson's a starter. Their offensive guard in the 3rd round, he may have to start. He's not ready, but he may have to start. Dane Belton is a very good sub-package safety. He's just smart. Comes from a team that gets their hands on the ball a lot. McFadden. Beavers in the 6th round. They're not all necessarily surefire starters, but so many of them are going to make the team and actually play plenty of minutes.
Good.
So
finally,
it's really good. Yeah, it's a really good look for the New York Giants.
It just feels like Philadelphia. It feels like Philadelphia. It just has been hitting home runs, haven't they?
Well, they stole. 3rd year in a row, they took somebody ahead of the team that wanted the person. Jordan Davis was rumored by everybody to go to Baltimore. They jumped from 15 to 13, take him. Everybody thinks it's a wide receiver that they're going after, and then in their pocket 5 minutes later, they get a ready-to-go wide receiver in a trade. So immediately they have a number 1 wide receiver. Immediately they have at least a 2-down defensive tackle to stop things in the middle of the line. They draft the replacement for Kelsey at center, somebody that he himself endorsed and scouted and loved. So you know that succession planning was really in there. And then Nakobe Dean, there were a lot of injury. Everybody thought, including myself, that he was going to go somewhere in the back end of the 1st round. And here you get him at pick 83.
Wow.
I know he had some injuries off season, but he hasn't missed a game the last 2 years. So I don't know.
How many draft picks did they go in with? It feels like they're only coming out with 5. Did they get some more draft capital for next year?
They got 1, I believe, for next year, and they did sacrifice a lot of draft capital. 2 for the wide receiver. I think they traded up for 1 or 2 others. It's unusual to see them trade up, but I believe they started with 9, roughly around 9. At one point, might have had 10 and ended up with 5. A very unusual draft for Philadelphia.
And the tight end, Calcaterra, does he fit in?
He fits in. He's the big issue is he retired in college due to concussions, and then he came back.
Yeah, we talked about
this. Is an incredible tight end crop, and he is rated, but he's probably 10th or 11th on my board for tight ends. But then he was drafted 198, so that's a fit. Yeah. I have no problem with the tight end. I have no problem with the fact that he can be productive in the system.
Did Washington fill the right holes in?
Washington lost value. They missed out. They didn't. You talked about this last year, how you thought their defense was going to be underwhelming, and it was. So if you look at what they did for the back seven, they did nothing. The only pick they chose with linebacker or cornerback or safety was pick 240. So I think they misplaced what their focus was. And then offensive line, the first pick that they made for offensive line was pick 230. So I have a big problem with how they went about the draft board. I do think Sam Howell fits on this team, and you may hear him sooner rather than later because he's almost ready for the NFL. The question is, how good is he?
How about the safety Butler out of Louisiana, though? You don't think he's NFL ready?
No, he's not ready yet, and he is rated on my board. He received a rating probably 4th, 5th round is what I'm going to end up with for him. So he was one of the ones that was actually properly drafted. Maybe him and Howell, the only two, but he's sub-packaged for right now.
So they need it better immediately because they got to beef up their DBs.
They look like they're in trouble unless we know something about Carson Wentz's leadership that I'm missing.
That's breaking news.
You know, early on the draft, everybody was complaining about how few tools Fields was going to have for Chicago, and they were really disappointed. And then by the end of the draft, it seemed like a lot of people liked the Bears' overall draft. How do you map them out?
Deep, and we're going to talk about it a little later. I'm going to save the Bears. Very
Okay.
unusual and welcome relief for the Bears. Your Lions were kind of like the New York Giants. Unbelievable first round, kind of like the under-the-radar picks they made in the 6th and 7th round. Not as crazy about the middle rounds. I think Pasquale, when I did a little more work on him, I sort of like him, but I thought they should have gone in a different direction. And Kirby Joseph, these guys are going to stick with the team. I'd be surprised if maybe the linebacker at 217 doesn't make the team or goes to the practice squad, but the Lions have enough holes that these guys are going to make it. And the top two are going to play tomorrow.
Yeah, they went for all character type of guys. They obviously overdrafted Paschal. They might have been able to get him the following round for all we know.
Right.
But that guy, a cancer survivor, only 3-time captain for Kentucky, a real character guy. I sent you a commercial that guy did with very funny commercial for a dentist office. Campbell's building character type guys, people that are going to fit in and get excited. And they picked up a lot of people in the I don't know what you call the undrafted players, but they picked up some interesting, a nice speedy receiver from Western Michigan, I think, that they're excited about being available, and a couple other guys they think have a shot. So kind of excited about the Lions here.
Yeah, I want to make a point before we go on to Green Bay, is that you mentioned undrafted free agents. This year is so deep that the undrafted crop is even deep. And so in the past, I've noted about 30 players that have been undrafted, and I put them on various teams. There are 2 or 3 teams that have added 5 players apiece that could make it.
Wow.
So do not discount the undrafted. Maybe we'll spend a few minutes talking about it next week. But there are some players that are starters. There are eventual starters that there just was no room for them in this particular draft. I do want to welcome back Green Bay to the NFL draft tables. 2 years after trading up for Jordan Love, and last year doing whatever the hell they did in the draft, they are back. Now, Quay Walker was maybe overdrafted a little bit, but Devontae Wyatt adding a run defense presence for this team was an incredible move. The 3 wide receivers, Ted and I talked offline, but the guy in the 4th round, Romeo Dobbs, I believe is how we pronounce it. He's ready to go with Aaron Rodgers. I think Christian Watson has the higher upside, but Dobbs is ready to go. And the guy they drafted at 258 took snaps, caught passes from one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks in all of college football, Adrian Martinez of Nebraska, and parlayed that into 46 catches for a 20-yard average. So don't sleep on him either. I'm really impressed with how Green Bay hit their draft needs, and Minnesota we'll talk about later.
Chris looks a little depressed when you said that, by the way, but that's
not again. You know, between Green Bay, Detroit, and Chicago, that division actually just got better for the future. It's a pleasure to see.
It's about damn time.
Yeah.
I think Atlanta really should have gone for defense out of the gate. What do you think?
We'll save Atlanta.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think Atlanta needed to get anybody off the street. So I don't think there's any specific position they were looking at.
Well, I tell you, they drafted 2 potential edge rushers. So that's 2 more than they drafted in the last 403 years. So I applaud them for that.
I love the fact they got Drake London. I'm just not so sure anybody could throw it to him, but we'll see that later.
I have a big problem with Carolina. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I don't care what the draft offer was from 6. 9 teams made trades in the first round, starting with pick 11. Even if you have to take baby steps, go from 6 to 9, 9 to 11, 11 to 16. New Orleans wanted to trade up at 9 and 10. You make those moves because you don't want to be drafting 6th and then having to trade up twice just to get into the 3rd and 4th round. And that's what Carolina did. They sacrificed draft capital to take a quarterback that may never make it in the NFL, an underachieving linebacker that has tremendous physical tools, a good edge rusher, a fringe offensive guard, and a fast cornerback.
So Matt Rule has already ordered his flight to wherever his next job is.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Saints
did what they normally do, make a draft of 5, which is typical for them, and make sure that at least 2 of them are really, really good players. And Tampa was building a little bit for the future. I'm okay with Tampa's draft.
And let's not forget, we talked earlier, Ron, about not just who you drafted, but did you trade or sign somebody during the draft period? And Tyrann Mathieu headed home to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And that's a nice pickup.
That's a good point. Everybody is talking about what are you going to do at safety? Well, they did something, so we're okay with that. Take them off the undrafted guys that are needed. I like Arizona's GM. We'll talk a little bit about that in the slides. I thought they made Kyler Murray, an offer that he couldn't refuse. Every toy that he ever wants on offense is there for him. So it's an incredible haul. The defense, they're going to have some problems. And I think part of it is coaching because they do have talent defensively, but that's a different story. Rams, San Francisco, typical drafts. No reaches by the Seattle Seahawks. We're in a parallel universe now. And Pete Carroll and John Snyder's press conference was full of one-liners and a lot of good stuff. I don't know if you got a chance to view it, Ted, but it's a lot of fun. They stuck to their draft board. San Francisco and Seattle made a grand total of 1 trade in the 3-day draft period, and that's about 10 less than they normally make.
I think it's pretty obvious. Hopkins news was already known. That's why Arizona made their move. Wouldn't you agree there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, but we talked about what Arizona got and didn't get and what they lose. But the question is their quarterback, Murray, just going to be disgruntled because he's not paid enough? And if that's always going to be a cloud over him, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, hopefully these guys can get on the same page because that legitimately is a top 3 offense right now.
Yeah, but again, without Hopkins for half the season or whatever it is, several weeks, right?
16.
That's not a good thing either, because they dropped off the planet offensively when he got hurt last year. So we'll see if the other guys make the difference.
All right, you made us pause on these teams. Let's get to them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry to make you pause.
Baltimore seemed to have great, perfect players that were perfect fits just fall into their laps.
Yeah, they have new buildings in there, the big tight ends, right, Ron?
Baltimore did so many good things that we have 2 slides that have their name on it. But basically, these slides I'm proud of them because I think these are little nuggets that people aren't really looking at when they're analyzing the draft. And it's not always everybody has to go for speed or everybody has to do this or that. Some teams just need to do what they're built to do. And Baltimore sent a message. They drafted 2 of the top 5 tight ends in this draft. Isaiah Lively, his athletic profile didn't really fit, but all he does is get open and all he does is catch touchdowns. Charlie Kolar is a full-fledged tight end that has, to me, George Kittle type attributes, and that's a lot. These guys combined for 50 touchdowns in college. And they have Mark Andrews that's already a top 5 tight end. So what they're going to tell you is, yes, we traded our wide receiver, but we don't care. We're going to run it down your throat with our running backs and with Lamar. And Lamar is going to hit some very nice targets where he doesn't have to throw into tight windows because these tight ends are big.
He could throw it just straight up in the air.
So you're saying my 35-1 shot has hope?
Yeah. I think Baltimore built this team so that Jackson could have success in the pass game. And it's not with small wide receivers. It's with large tight ends.
I think it's very typical Harbaugh stuff, you know, and that's the entire Harbaugh family, by the way. You know, we're going to do it my way and it's going to work and we're going to do it. We're going to run my way down your throat. And in this case, it's literally run it down your throat. And they're sticking with Lamar Jackson and his style, and that's the way. Now they got to pay him next, so we'll see what happens with that. But it's my way or the highway with the Harbaughs.
Yeah, and New England. Let me say one positive thing about New England. They finally decided that it was all right to draft speed. They took the fastest wide receiver, and they took somebody else that was really fast on the defensive backfield area. And for a long time, they were dealing with interchangeable parts and just trying to get people who were fundamentally sound and could move laterally, but they didn't care about speed. The problem is, and Chris, you hinted at it when we talked about the AFC East, is that they're living in the past in a lot of other ways. They have 5 starting running backs on their roster, and running backs are devalued. Yeah. They drafted a guard that they could draft that is a good guard. Make no mistake about it. But if they take him in the 2nd round, even trade up, because they had 11 and even 12 picks during the 1st round after some trades, I don't mind if New England turned 12 picks into 7. They could trade up for Cole Strange at the top of the 2nd, but you missed out on getting somebody important in the 1st round because you drafted him in the 1st round. And then you get another quarterback that you probably hope doesn't play, basically telling everybody that the 4th round didn't matter to you. So that's my problem with New England.
Are these bordering on like close to rookie mistakes rather than just poor judgment?
I think this was what happened. This is a real throwback, Ted. I don't know if you remember this, but this is a throwback to Bill Walsh days when he was just hitting it with all these off-the-wall picks, the quarterbacks that nobody else picked. Jerry Rice picked 10th from Mississippi Valley State. As Bill Walsh got later in his career, he was having so much success with these needle in a haystack picks that he kept doing that and it stopped working. Yeah. And that's my feeling about Bill Belichick. He's still trying to do this. He had such a great draft last year that, let's do some of this again when it shouldn't have been done.
Outthinking yourself is what you're doing, basically.
Yeah.
And you also, look, a lot of that is ego. It's like, hey, I'm going to do things the way I want to do them. You don't like it, that's your problem. I already have all these rings. It doesn't matter anyway. And it doesn't do much for your future, unfortunately.
No.
Or your present.
Okay. The rules that I state here, I cannot emphasize enough. Tight end, we had Trey McBride, who was by far rated the best tight end in the group. And then you had 5, 6, 7, or 8 really good tight ends, but they were interchangeable. The rule, I say, if you have one person that stands out, that you go get him. And Arizona, who basically didn't necessarily need a tight end, took a tight end because if they wanted a 2 tight end alignment, that was the best they could do. Teams that needed the #1 tight end, then were closed out because Arizona did that. Baltimore did the same thing when they ended up with Hamilton at pick 14. They didn't panic. They stayed there. They didn't get their defensive tackle. They stopped the slide of Hamilton, but the big difference between Hamilton and any other safety in this draft was huge. Now, flip the coin. If you look at offensive line, there were 7, 8, 9 offensive linemen that were taken in the first round, 6 of which were almost interchangeable. The 4 offensive tackles and 2 really, really good offensive guards. The rule I say here is don't be first. Carolina, they're not ever going to be confused with the top 10 drafting organization. They went first for offensive line. You can't do that. Atlanta, one of the worst drafting organizations that we've seen. We had 6 wide receivers drafted between spots 8 and 18. Half the draft, almost all the draft between, let's say, 6 and 18, with either you took an offensive lineman or a wide receiver. They were falling off the board like crazy. Don't be first. Atlanta, they were first.
Yep.
What else can we say?
It's a story, though, isn't it? It's the same ones do it every year,
yeah,
and it doesn't shock you anymore.
No. So Baltimore had a 1-year plan. This is called thinking ahead. They made 2 trades. They got 2 4th-round picks, giving them 3. They got compensatory picks. All of a sudden, they were up by 5. Then they got 1 more trade that they traded down for. They had 6 picks in the 4th round. This was not by chance. Everybody knew, or most everybody knew, that this draft was going to be deep, right down the middle. Wasn't necessarily deep for early running backs, certainly not for quarterbacks, but somebody drafted at pick 120 might have been drafted at pick 80 any other year because of the depth of this draft. So what did they do? They resisted trade offers. They had multiple trade offers for any or all of their picks in the 4th round. They wanted all 6 of those picks, and every one of them was a rated player. They took the Michigan edge.
I'm sorry, by super senior benefits, you're meaning basically because of the COVID situation, you basically had a double draft coming out.
Absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out. Some people who weren't really ready to be drafted or needed to hone their skills, they got an extra year courtesy of the NCAA, and they became better players and they became NFL material. They would have been wasted on an undrafted free agent board, not ready otherwise. So they stayed in school, they got the extra year, and here they are being drafted in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round, and they're better for it.
So in other words, we need to appreciate the depth of this draft mostly because of COVID situation. This is not going to be something we're going to see very often.
Next year, we'll have some residual effect of that because we will see some of the people that got that extra year, but then it'll be declining from year to year after that. So next year will be another deep draft, and everybody will love it because it'll be full of quarterbacks too. So let's go to Chicago and the Giants. The most important point is the first point.
Yeah.
Great they lost their GMs. Yeah. So then Chicago does something they've never done, and it was really pointed out. They've never had 11 picks in a draft. They started day 3 with 3 picks. They ended day 3 with 8 picks. They didn't have a 1st-round pick because of what Ryan Pace had done with the team, basically traded away, and they didn't have one of the other picks because they traded away for a right tackle. They had 11 picks. Not all the players were perfect. They took 4 offensive linemen, and I don't really like 3 of them. But at least they've added competition at that spot. They need Fields to be upright. First game Fields played, he was sacked 8 times. So, I really applaud the roster for understanding how to maneuver the draft and how to rebuild this organization. And then the Giants, then they did their thing as well. What comes up must come down. So if you have 2 thumbs up, we must have 2 thumbs down, right? Minnesota was the reason why they dumped their GM and their coach, because the GM just couldn't. He just kept trading back. 39 picks in 3 years. They never moved up to try to get over the hump and stop being a minor playoff team, but get into the, past Green Bay when Green Bay was vulnerable. past Tampa, past all these other teams. Instead, they drafted a bunch of average guys. So what does the GM do? He says he's going to do it differently, trades 20 spots back from 12 to 32, makes a trade up, a trade back day 2, makes 3 more trades in day 3, and ends up with a whole bunch of mediocrity in the draft and nothing that you can put your finger on that's going to make them better. Certainly not in 2022. Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay gets better. Minnesota gets worse.
So if
you're the Minnesota fans were PO'd that the Lions were able to get that number 12 pick, and we were pretty happy to get that.
Well, how about the new coach? All right, Kevin O'Connell walks in there and says, "Okay, we're starting new. Got a new GM. Everything's new." I mean, he's got to be like his head's spinning around like a top, isn't it, or no?
It's crazy what they were doing, and he had to do kind of a take back. The GM, he said, "No, I didn't plan it this way, but the opportunity arose. We'll do something different in the future." I just don't think they prepared very well for this draft, and maybe other people will have higher grades on the players chosen. But when I put the full report out, which will be June, because I'm going to take a break myself, when I put the full report out in June, Minnesota at this point doesn't appear to be getting a thumbs up from me.
You know,
let's close.
I was thinking about buying Vikings futures also. I'm glad I don't have them at this point.
Well, let's close this by talking about one of the organizations that the NFL draft being the fairest thing that you can ever have, rewarding teams that are bad with early round draft picks and 4th round schedules. Yet how come every year we see Jacksonville in this position? Trent Baalke with San Francisco and with Jacksonville, famous for taking people that have injury risks, famous for trading, different kinds of players here and there. They started the draft with 12 picks. They needed to get out from the Urban Meyer debacle. How do you end the draft with super seniors and 270 rated players? How do you end the draft with 7 selections instead of 12 and take a guy who has a 1-year body of work with your number 1 overall pick and then make the crazy statement that we traded out of the 6th and 7th round because we didn't think this draft had a lot of depth? That's what he actually said.
Should he have been fired immediately after those words came out of his mouth?
Well, there's a draft analyst that I respect. There's 1 or 2 that I follow for sure, and one of the guys, he works at Establish the Run. His name is Evan Silva, and he basically said what I've been thinking all along. He said somebody should hide the keys to the room from the GM. And basically it's like show him the door or something like that, because what he did with this draft, and we all hope that Walker hits and maybe one or the other. You can't help by having top picks. They got Devin Lloyd. They traded up for Devin Lloyd, and that's a good linebacker, my number 1 linebacker. And then the 3rd pick is a center that is serviceable, but the other 4 picks are not. And
right.
It's a problem.
Yeah, well, Walker was probably an overdraft.
Yeah, he's 3rd rated for my defensive ends.
Wow.
Just for defensive ends, yeah.
Yeah, and Ron and I talked about this a few days ago after the draft. Just the fact that he has 1 fantastic season is great, right? But how many of those guys are a number 1 overall pick in a draft if you're not a quarterback?
Exactly.
Ever. So, he may turn out to be great, and I hope he does. But good luck.
So Chris, I'm going to pose a question.
The draft is over. What's next for you? What do you do now, Ron?
Well, I got a big report coming out, but it will come out in June, where I detail everything with an eye on the schedule when it comes out and the peaks and valleys there, and also with an eye on what I think their prognosis is going to be, what I'm going to project them versus season wins. So the June recap is going to be detailed analysis of every pick they made, including undrafted free agents, some comedy, some tragedy, some 2 thumbs up for the different teams. But we're going to be really that first look at as to now, how are they going to perform in 2022? And then I'm going to put it aside for a couple months and not do anything else. But we have one more piece of business before we put a bow on this. So I'll let you guys start. I list 11 different guys that can still help a team now that are free agents in the NFL. What names are you hearing, and how do you feel about some of this?
Well, I first want to bring up the fact, to me, it's something that's important. I don't hear anybody talking about it, and that is the wide receivers that have been either free agents or traded in the last few weeks, mostly traded, are incredibly overpriced at this point. I'm wondering, will this be a trend similar to what happened after Zeke Elliott was signed? You had overpriced guy who was not going to do whatever you needed him to do for that money. And if that happens at the wide receiver position, even though the league is built for that now, are we going to start seeing some of that? It's going to take a few years to say, you know what, we can't do this anymore because it's not even close to worth what we're paying for these guys.
We saw those huge three running backs got those huge contracts that all backfired.
Yeah, absolutely.
And running backs aren't going to get those deals anymore. And the same thing's going to happen with these receivers. You pointed it out.
You know, and they're going to have to fit with the right quarterback too, of course, which is going to help. But just because they're a great receiver, Devontae Adams is not going to go to Atlanta and kill the world statistically. On
the left side, you have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, first and second year guys who are going to get the $25 million plus contract when their contracts are due. On the right side, you have Christian Kirk, $72 million for Christian Kirk, and that has to stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pretty good wrap up. I think there's a lot more free agents. Sue, isn't he going back to Tampa?
Well, they've left some room for Sue. We talk about the defensive line. Akeem Hicks is another defensive lineman.
That's the one I was thinking.
You got Bradbury's situation with the New York Giants. They should do everything they can to try to solve that problem because, you know, I think they could use him still. They didn't draft a cornerback, if I remember correctly. The New York Giants went for Thibodeau and they went for Neal. So they left the defensive back uncovered. That would be a huge loss if they didn't get him. Odell Beckham is still out there. J.C. Treader, the center, is still out there. Gronkowski can join Sue, maybe back, maybe not back. Riley Reef, I don't know how you feel about him. You had him for a cup of coffee or more than that in Detroit. Jarvis Landry. So there's a few out there.
Yeah. To me, Hicks, I love Hicks. But I'm wondering, has he lost a step or was he just in a bad situation with Chicago's defense just spiraling downward?
Don't know about that. If he goes to the right team and he's single covered, that would be a different story. So
yeah,
it's all about team fit, whether you're a rookie or whether you're not.
Yep. And of course, OBJ is off of surgery. So, you know, we have no idea what that's going to be like.
You'd think he'd want to go back to the Rams on some sweetheart deal for the team, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, but I think he's looking for a paycheck too.
Yep.
He saw what wide receivers were paid. So he's still young.
He likes the idea that he lives in LA now. So, you know, all you got to do is walk to the stadium. Maybe that's a stretch, but I don't think that money is going to pay to take care of his needs in that respect, though.
Well, great show, guys. We wrapped it up. The draft is not my bag, as you can probably tell by my contributions, but nevertheless, it's by far the most interesting draft I've ever seen. So
it really is.
It bores me to tears normally.
I think, Chris, the fact that there weren't great quarterbacks in this made it twice as interesting. Finally, because everybody only talks about the quarterbacks, and here we just had so many teams get good. We're going to have a hell of a league this year.
Well, we've got the NFL schedules being released. Everybody knows who they're playing, and a lot of people are, jumping the gun and they're betting their season wins. But you know what? When you start looking at travel and you start looking at Thursdays and Mondays and short rest and, beginning of the season, end of the season, there's a lot of factors that come into play, and you really need to know what that schedule flow is before you can really dig deep. I talked to Ron about it this morning. I had the shakes. Hey, can we do anything? Can we find anything? And it's hurry up and wait. Let's wait for that schedule. And I'm looking forward to that schedule release.
Yeah. How about the Thursday nights and how that's going to come into play? Because I think they're going to want to have more of the elite teams there, and that's going to really change some stuff.
We've got Thursday night in Europe this year, I think I saw.
Oh, I can't wait.
Wow. Yeah,
so
I think with Thursday night, what happens is if you're an established veteran team and you're used to that, that's one thing. If you're not used to it, like the Cleveland Browns, every time expectations go up, they go down because they're not used to this limelight. They're putting a team and an organization in a spot where they have short weeks, more travel, road off road kind of situations. That's what I'm going to be looking for in the schedule. Which teams are new to the process that are going through and having from one primetime game to 2, 3, or 4.
But the Cleveland Browns have a $250 million quarterback. They're fine. It's all good.
Yeah. Thanks, Ted.
All right. We were going to wrap this up. Thanks for everybody for joining us. We're not going to plug anything, and we're not going to tell you to like or subscribe or retweet anything. So
you are so wrong, but that's okay.
Oh, we forgot about that.
My
Buy
book.
Ted's book
On Amazon. Get it. Thank you. But I won't plug anything.
Cheers.
So long.